Good morning. I am super excited to welcome you guys to this week's Millionaire brand creation. I have a very special guest with us here today. And before I introduce him, I'm going to tell you why he's so special in many ways. This gentleman's the co owner and COO of the American Association of Motorcycle Injury Lawyers. You probably better know it as Law Tigers, which is a national law group that you've probably seen their commercials on YouTube and TV. I was in Texas actually over the weekend, Ari, and I saw one of your commercials out there. And so I was super excited to talk to you, and not only about entrepreneurship, but more importantly about your story of being a teacher transitioning into a business titan with your father, growing that business nationally. And then we got to talk about watches too, because I know you love watches as much as I do. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to my friend, Ari Levenbaum. Ari, how are you this morning?
I'm well. Thank you for the kind words. I wouldn't call myself a titan. I'm working on titan. I'm I'm a couple levels below that, but that's what I aspire to be a titan one of these days.
Well,
Like JP Morgan.
humility, yeah, humility is always the first step on that.
Thank you.
But I wanted to go back into the past and talk about your story as a kid. Tell me a little bit about how you were raised and some of the things that taught you your business acumen that you have today.
It really starts with my father, who deserves a great deal of credit because the Law Tiger brand and concept was his baby, his idea. But it started back when he was growing up in Boston, didn't have much to his name, and had a bit of a rough childhood on the streets of Dorchester in Massachusetts, and he really pulled himself up from his bootstraps and put himself through college, law school, had me when he was in his 20s with my mother, of course, and then decided to go west, and it was California, Arizona, and luckily for us, nothing against California, but we came to Arizona, and so those formative years when I was growing up, I wasn't early on, raised with, a silver spoon in my mouth. We had a modest early upbringing, and then my father found success probably when I was 7, 8, 9 years old with his law firm, which was a general PI practice at the time in the late 70s, early 80s. But my fondest memories back then were of the two of us going out and riding three-wheelers, right? Back then, those of you that probably are younger than, mid 20s or 30s aren't necessarily aware of this, but three-wheelers were the big thing back in the 70s and 80s. They called them ATCs, all-terrain cycles, three-wheelers. Unfortunately for the companies that produced them, like Yamaha and Honda, they weren't very safe, and they tipped and caused a lot of injuries. But fortunately for me, I didn't sustain too many, but I grew up on them and went to the dunes and the desert and rode around the streets of Scottsdale, breaking laws and breaking fences at the equestrian manor to get to the dirt, and just loved growing up riding motorcycles. I mean, I had the other hobbies like skateboarding and biking and basketball, but for me, my true passion and what I loved to do was get on that three-wheeler, later a dirt bike, an XL80, and enjoy all that was associated with it. And occasionally crashed, spilled, but as a kid, you're plastic and flexible, so I didn't kill myself, fortunately. But that's what I caught the bug with, or gave me the interest in motorized vehicles. And of course, my dad had some motorcycles. In fact, he used to be a criminal defense lawyer, and he had this chopper chained to our tree at my childhood home. And I had asked him, like, what's up with this chopper? I was enamored by it, and it was one of his clients who was a drug dealer that couldn't pay his bill. So the motorcycle was collateral, which he eventually kept and ended up selling. And the same thing happened with a Banshee, which is a four-wheel quad that this meth dealer couldn't pay his bill from Cave Creek. Couldn't pay his bill, so I luckily inherited that. I've since sold it. But anyway, we grew up riding motorcycles. It was a blast. And as I got older and became a school teacher and didn't have the money at the time to buy a Harley, my father gave me a small amount of money towards the motorcycle, and we ended up riding our Harleys together on some amazing trips when I was in my mid to late 20s. And That's really when my dad came up with this whole notion or concept of marketing to a group of people that we could relate to and we could help, really the motorcycle niche. And so, this all started about 21 years ago with just an idea he had to become kind of the premier motorcycle personal injury lawyer, not only in Arizona, but in his mind, ultimately to license it to lawyers throughout the country to become a brand, kind of like Kleenex is to tissue. We wanted Law Tigers to be the motorcycle firm and lifestyle brand that people would associate with when in need.
So obviously, you saw your father. You looked up to you as your big role model. How did you transition to become a teacher before you came into the business world?
So I was actually in law school. I went to U of A after graduating from Chaparral High School. I was a Scottsdale kid. Went, and again, I have to say, as the years progressed, I did live an upper middle class lifestyle. But my dad always reminded me of the fact that, look, you're gonna have to support yourself one of these days. And we were fortunate enough to have a good life, but he'd take me to some of the poorest parts of Phoenix, and when we go to Mexico, poor areas of Mexico, to say, look, you're very fortunate and lucky to have what you have, and I busted my hump to get where I am, and I expect the same of you. So I always had that in the back of my mind. And my dad was always working, so he really modeled what a strong work ethic would look like or should look like. But I went to U of A, getting back, and thought I wanted to follow my first footsteps, becoming an attorney. But it was for really the wrong reasons. I saw the success it brought and the happiness it brought to him, and I figured, it would make him happy and me to follow in his footsteps. And so I really worked towards that end. I did pretty good in college, peaked on the LSATs because I studied my ass off for months between my senior year and I took a year off, um, and did really well in the LSATs. At the same time, to make some money between going to law school and graduating, I substitute taught, and the kids just ate
Mm.
me alive the first year. I mean, I had no idea as a substitute teacher how to manage classrooms and kids, and these were middle schoolers, right? So they're like the worst of the worst, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, especially the seventh and eighth graders. So anyway, despite the fact that they gave me a run for my money, I still enjoyed being around the kids, and it just felt good to help out. And I did some long-term substitute teaching for teachers that were out, and still never thought I'd be a teacher because I was going along the path that my father had kind of set out as a lawyer. So got into a bunch of law schools, many more than I anticipated, because of my really good stats and college experience with honoraries and decent GPA, and went to USC and was there for literally like a month and a half, and just fell out of place. Didn't like it. Didn't I should have thought about this before, but I was 21, 22, and just realized it wasn't for me, at least at the time. So I deferred my enrollment because it was pretty early in the process, the first semester, and could have come back the following year and chose not to, and kind of did some soul searching and decided I wanted to become a teacher. And so I went back, got my post back in education and a master's in education, and ended up teaching for 8 years. But about halfway through that, my father had come up with the Law Tiger concept, and I wasn't involved for about the first year. My mom helped out, some other folks he had hired helped out. Really, it was very back then. The program hadn't been really developed to what it is today. Um, but a year into it, he asked me to come help, do some events, visit some shops, really help with the grassroots marketing. And so I had always had a second job because teaching didn't pay squat, and I gave up my second job working at a restaurant, and I worked at Sleep America for a while, worked at Sammy's Pizza and Pasta, and a couple other restaurants, and came on board full time. I'm sorry, part time. Weekends, evenings, summers, doing grassroots marketing, and it was tough. I mean, I was doing events in the summer all year, but the summers were brutal. I was setting up, the trailer, passing out promo items, and I'd get off late, and the family would be, at dinners and functions, and I would either miss it or come late because I had obligations out in the field, and that back then also my father and my relationship was sometimes a bit tenuous because I was an employee, and he was pretty. His expectations were high, and if I missed someone, giving someone like a card walking by, he'd be yelling at me. Or I gave it to like a kid, a promo item. He was like, "That's a waste of money." So it was tough the first few years, but over time, we kept growing the business. And at a few 4 years later, he offered me a full time job, and I was kind of already been a little burnt out with teaching. I had done it 8 years, and just realized I needed to do something else. And I loved motorcycles, and I loved being out there in the community. And I took a full time job, and really helped. That was when things started really taking off in our market, and we ended up adding a few more markets, which is my dad's dream to expand. And I started doing some training in the other markets, and before you knew it, we needed more people, and we ended up selling another 4 or 5 markets. It was before I had ownership, but we also weren't really getting to that next level where we were expanding throughout the country until a little later on in the process.
So, the listeners are obviously entrepreneurs, right? They're in the real estate space, they're in the entrepreneurial space. And obviously, like many of them, starting out, you were struggling. You came from an upper middle class, you were a school teacher, you worked your ass off like so many listeners do. What was the catalyst change in your brain where you're like, I got to become an owner? I got to do whatever it takes to really expand this and grow this business to where we're going to have a larger footprint and a large income. What was the change in your mind for that?
Well, the catalyst was getting ownership for me, quite honestly, because at the time my dad would say, "Well, you'll get my half of the business one of these days." I'm like, "Yeah, well, 20 years from now, maybe. What's that? What's that do for me now?" So he and his former partner, were not on the same page. His former partner was his legal partner, but also had 50% equity in this separate entity called AAMIL, the American Association of Motorcycle Injury Lawyers, which is our parent company. And so I was working, for really both of them. And fortunately for me, there was an exit where that partner sold out not only his interest in the law firm, but also his interest in this other company, even though he hadn't done anything to grow it or build it. And so I basically bought him out, and I paid, a premium for something I had personally helped grow. But that was for me, I knew it needed to be done. I needed to control the B2B process, which I hadn't really done. My father had done that. My father's a brilliant man, but I'm better at interfacing with people and process and day to day than him. He's really the visionary, the entrepreneur, the numbers guy. I'm the execution guy. And so that was it. I was able to acquire actually a 5% stake. My former brother-in-law, who was my dad's former partner, no longer had a purchase the other 25%, and my dad had his existing 50. So that really got me going. But then once I bought my former brother-in-law's 25%, a couple years later, that's when I really hit the pedal to the metal. Hired a high-end B2B sales guy to work with me and change the whole approach to marketing to lawyers to mirror, or not mirror, but somewhat replicate in terms of process and approach what we did with our riders, meaning sponsoring events, doing more email drips, having full-time focus on B2B with a professional sales guy, and incentivizing sales for him. And so between the two of us, tag teaming, we were able to take what was once a brand in 5, 6 states, all the way up to now 27. And really the rapid growth has occurred in the past, like, say, 3 or 4 years. And I also attribute it to taking care of my existing members and having them help either validate or recruit like-minded attorneys in other markets, to join the program. So yeah, really ownership was the catalyst, and age. Look, back then I was in my 20s and 30s. I really didn't peak or mature probably till late 30s, early 40s, and I attribute some of that to my wife, kind of helping me get my focus, and also just age and experience. But look, it was a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of mistakes, but we came out ahead, and we continue to tweak and grow, and one step back, two step forward. But you got to be all in. You can't just do things half-assed, and you got to have that killer instinct and be like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get either ahead or get part of the
So
part of the pie. If you
here's my question for you, Ari. So the people listening in, maybe they're at a point in their life like you where you had to make a change, right? I assume you took on debt or you took a big risk buying all that ownership and you bet on yourself. If you had to do it all over again, let's say you're in the real estate space or another entrepreneur, what are some steps they could tangibly take now to help really elevate their business, especially in sales and marketing? Because I know that's your forte, so to speak.
Well, I can say probably the most, obviously I took on some debt. My dad loaned me some money, and I also took out some loans, and I saved some. So you got to be willing to take a chance and and understand that you may not win. Entrepreneurs are willing to take chances and risks, but you're investing in yourself. And my dad to invest yourself in your own business because you can control it, right? Secondarily, though, is surrounding yourself with really good people. I can't stress that enough. I used to do the media buying for my company, which is like buying TV, outdoor radio. I used to also do the grassroots. Now, the only thing I didn't do was the digital, and that's kind of over my head. I have a staff now that works for me that does that, but it really wasn't relevant when I first started the business like it is now, digital marketing. But my point is I hired people that are much better at these specific roles than I ever was. Now, it didn't happen overnight. I couldn't afford a six-figure media buyer or a VP of field operations back then. So it was gradual. I didn't overspend, and I did a lot of the roles myself. And then as we grew and had the additional capital to invest in labor, which I think is super important. You don't want to shortchange that because a lot of people are like, look, every dollar I pay out in labor or expense is one less dollar in my pocket. Yes, but you have to forego some of that income and upside early on to get to where you want to be later. I wasn't making seven figures, you know, up until 7, 8 years ago, and the reason was because I was investing a lot of money back into the business. So, but you have to have really good people, and you have to have a good hiring process, a good vetting process, and people that are as passionate as you and as dedicated as you and are really good at their craft. And I have some of the best media buyers, grassroots team members. So I think that's important. You have to have a process. You have to have a game plan, a roadmap to success. You can't just do things haphazardly or fly by the seat of your pants. And you got to do something that someone else can't do, whether it's outwork them, outthink them, outmaneuver them, or provide value to someone beyond what someone else can do. So I don't think it's one thing, but there are several key components I think to growing and then sustaining a successful business.
Was there one foray into marketing, whether it be, because I know you from your commercials. I mean, everywhere I go, I see like injured in a, motorcycle accident or, and you have
Right,
the tiger running through the forest and all that stuff.
right.
What was it that really catapulted you guys to the forefront of, your, I would say, genre, so to speak, in that law category? Was it print? Was it TV? What was it specifically?
Grassroots, without a doubt. So it's pounding the pavement. We have when people say, "What's your secret sauce?" if you will, the first thing I say is we have a very well defined, well executed grassroots marketing strategy. And by that, I mean we have in every market we're in, which is almost 50 now, individual markets, the way we define them, I have a marketing manager. And he or
Mm,
she is always a writer and hopefully, or not hopefully, generally has some sort of sales and marketing experience. Not always, but most of the time. And this person is really the face of our brand locally. They visit shops, they attend motorcycle events, they work with clubs and organizations, they do social media. They become immersed in the local culture and riding community. And that's why I like to say we're really a lifestyle brand, first and foremost. And we happen to represent injured motorcycle riders and help out their family members when in need. But most of the time, that's not what we're really pushing or proselytizing, because most people don't want to hear about that until they're in an accident. So, yeah, the TV
Mm.
commercials do at the end have a call to action, but to call us if they're injured in a motorcycle accident. But much of our marketing efforts is support dealer. Their marketing efforts. We do co-branded tents, co-branded document holders, social media, live posts and live stuff. We sponsor events, we print flyers, anything to help drive business and awareness to our shop partners and to support events through a slew of promotions. In fact, I'm meeting with the Arizona Bike Week ownership. We also happen to be the title sponsor, or one of the title sponsors of the event. And now they're looking to us to perhaps take over their marketing efforts, because that's what we do. And so Grassroots accounts for anywhere from 30 to 50% of our business, either directly through referrals that my managers generate through the relationships, or through the promotional items and the branding that we do throughout the year at shops, events, and with clubs. And we do shop talks, we do insurance talks, things that really provide value to the riding community. That's what differentiates us. But it also takes a lot of time, money, and effort, because you have to have, structure in place to make sure the managers are doing their job. So I have regional directors, I have 5 of them, each of whom oversee 8 or 9 managers. And we have KPIs, we have GPS trackers on the van. They go and visit them to make sure they secret shop them, to make sure they're not only doing the quantitative things, which is the measurables, like a certain number of shop lunches and visits and shop talks, but also the intangibles, the qualitative component, which is, are they effective at their approach of integrating, interfacing with shop staff and ownership, and truly driving referrals. It's a very detailed, complex grassroots program that we've refined and continue to refine, and uh, and that's really, for me, what's driven our success. Now, you don't want to diminish the digital, which allows us to reach a broader audience and target through through behavioral targeting and whatnot, and also the traditional, which gets us, gets our name out there from a brand building standpoint. And they all work together when we run contests, and they're integrating all of the elements. But at the end of the day, we do a lot of focus around our grassroots marketing and what we do in the community, and that's hard to replicate. So that's why we're successful.
So basically, if I heard that correctly, your concept that worked extremely well that can be duplicated in other businesses is basically formulating a plan to educate and empower other leaders, not just locally, but nationally, for them to become leaders in their space. And then making sure those leaders are empowering and helping the other people that work with you as well. So it's kind of a cascade effect. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and I'm a big believer in connecting people, and when you connect people and you also empower people and provide value to them, it comes back to you tenfold, right? Uh, and so I've always had success in that, and also doing, do what you say what you do. But it doesn't matter the industry you're in. It could be real estate, which I know you're involved with, or any industry for that matter. Relationships matter, and the best leads and the best valued cases come generally from a referral. And people like to do business with people they like and trust. And when you have someone refer someone to you, you're going to have a much higher rate of conversion, getting the business, and generally they have repeat business, and then they tell other people. I tell my lawyers all the time, look, if you take care of your clients that we send you, because we generate the leads, and I tell my managers and my team, do right by people. That's the most cost effective way to drive business, is through referrals and through relationship marketing. In fact, my team and I did a 3-day Dale Carnegie course 2 weeks ago on relationship selling. And it's so important, because you can only spend so much on TV, outdoor, radio. You're competing with everybody else. That's not a differentiator. Even if you have better creative, at the end of the day, the most important thing is taking care of your customers, and building meaningful relationships and pounding the pavement. You can't do this sitting behind it. I sit behind a desk more than I ever wanted or imagined, because now I run the company, but it wasn't always like that. And I have a lot of people in the field, on the ground, in front of stakeholders that help us drive business.
So I know you didn't have any kids, but you're an amazing teacher because you were one for 8 years, and I'm sure you were an amazing student learning from your father. If you did have a son or a daughter, what are some things that you learned in life that you would bestow on them as far as knowledge or nuggets that might help them in the business world, life in general?
First and foremost, you follow your passion. You can't do, and I know this may sound trivial or trite. You can't go into something just because you can make, potentially make a lot of money, or because this industry pays a lot, right? Because let's be honest, in most industries, you know, 10-20% of the folks within the industry make probably 80% of the money. So,
Right.
you got to be really good at what, people think PI lawyers are all rich. I see the financials. They're not all rich. The wealth is concentrated. And the same thing with real estate agents, right? And developers. It's those that excel that make most of the money. So you've got to do something that you're really passionate about. Because look, this is your life. This is your work. You spend more time, working than, especially if you're driven, than you do probably sleeping. So follow something that doesn't seem like work. What I do doesn't seem like work because I love motorcycles. I love people. I love this industry. That's number one. Number two, I would say you can't just make life all about work, because if it is, if you are at a balance, you're going to pay the price. Whether it's, burning yourself out, relying on, drugs or alcohol or something to keep you going, or sane or happy, or you're just gonna not have a well balanced happy life, and you'll look back and say, what did I do with it? So I think balance is key. It took me probably about 15 years to learn that, because my wife really pushed me to do that. So balance in life is important, and I think thirdly is really the focus being on how can I serve and help others. um, that needs to be the forefront. We call it servant leadership. I do that with my team. It's not about just getting ahead yourself. It's about empowering other people, uplifting other people, making them successful, and in turn, it happens. It does. They'll want to see success for you as well. So putting other people first, and then I think lastly is, you know, putting putting more value on time. That's one
Mm,
thing that is limited in our lives, and throughout the day, right? I think you ask anyone who's made it in life, you know, if you gave up, would you be willing to give up half or all your fortune just to have more time to spend on this earth with friends and family and loved ones? And I guarantee you, they would all say yes. So, you know, and health, of course, that goes along with that. Staying healthy and staying, staying in a position where you can enjoy life for as long as possible. But you gotta be able to, you know, live your life like it's your last day. Uh,
mm.
and that's why some people that, are dying say that, they cherish every day because they know their days are numbered. But all of our days are numbered, right? Just at varying degrees. So I think, you shouldn't have to have like a near death experience, or, something that's life altering to really appreciate that, time is a valuable asset. And that also goes for, working with other people. You need to value their time too and respect their time, because that comes back to you in spades. So those would be the things I probably would tell. And I have a stepdaughter, so I've tried to impart some of these principles and things I've learned on her, and she's really come around. She was a bit of a slow learner and adopter, but so was I. So everyone's different. So if you have kids, don't give up on them if they don't seem to really have gotten it at an age that you feel is reasonable, or at your age, because everybody matures and peaks at different times in their lives.
One of the things when I studied successful people and having interviewed and befriended so many of them over the last 5 or 10 years, proximity becomes really important. What's interesting is you tell me where someone lives and who they interact with, I can tell you pretty quickly how far they have the ability to go. And that's
Right.
why I do these podcasts. To me, I think it's so empowering to have people have access, to people like yourself who have learned, right? Did you have mentors other than your father growing up, or even of recent, that say, "Hey, Ari, you're making some dough. maybe these are some plays that you should do and or things you should look for. How did they impact you in your life?
Sure. My father was my first, and he's modeled some really good behaviors in terms of diversification outside of our business in terms of investing, and I do now that I'm fortunate enough to have more disposable income, invest in other opportunities, and you and I have talked about this, but I try to I do the same thing as you're talking about. I say, okay, I don't want to be around people that are less successful than me. Now, I want to be around people that are way more successful than me, as well as have lived more life than me. So I'm not just talking when I say success, it's not just money, right? It's
Right.
it's it's success in life. Whether they've invented something or they've had obviously if they've had a liquidity event and they've made, cashed out of their business, that's of interest to me as well. But it's also people that have lived a good life, done well, not just for themselves, but for others. So what I've done as of late, probably the past 3 or 4 years, because before that I didn't have the disposable income, is I've searched out people and asked friends about people that they feel would be worth they would recommend me talking to. So, in case in point, there's a gentleman. He's a very well-to-do investor. He developed some baking software. He's also owned some motorcycle dealerships. I basically kept calling him and saying, "Look, I want to take you to lunch. I want to learn more about what you do." And that gentleman is really the catalyst for so much that I've done now in terms of investing. He because I met with him, and this is about 3 or 4 years ago. I was able to join a software investment group. I was able to make investments directly in a couple of companies as well as into some private equity funds, and it all stemmed from that one meeting that then led to me meeting somebody else, and then I met somebody else. I just talked to somebody last week from Northwest Mutual, and I'm looking at possibly having them help me do a wealth building strategy where I'm not as heavily focused, let's say, on just like high risk, angel investing and private equity deals. So I have a balanced portfolio, but that came out of subsequent meetings with people that all tie back to this one gentleman. So I'd say for me, I'm just looking. I don't know a lot about software. I don't know about a lot about real estate and real estate investing, but I know there's opportunities there to help me grow wealth and diversify outside of my individual business that I do know a lot about. So I just try to meet people and learn about different opportunities. And Phoenix has really become a hub for soft startups and software companies. Uh, and so now I think I've invested in I think I'm in 4 or 5 funds and probably another 10 or 12 individual businesses, all because of that. So yeah, and again, it's nothing it's nothing tied to my marketing background. It's really things that are way over my head, and I've relied on these people and their expertise to guide me and direct me into hopefully what will be investments that pay off into the future.
Well, it's funny you say that because I had a lunch with a buddy of mine who, young guy, 35 years old, multi-deca millionaire, self-made, and he is in the health space as well as real estate and private equity as well. And he was telling me that what he likes to do now is get together a bunch of guys, go through deal decks, and everyone who is knows about that, business or etc convinces each other why it's a bad deal. And then if they cannot convince each other of why it's a bad deal, they all invest in the same deal. And he was telling me by pooling your money together, you get a lot more warrants, you get a lot more opportunities in these businesses. Instead of writing a check for, let's say, $250,000, you can write one check for 5 or 10 million,
Right.
with 10 guys or whatever. The opportunities are vast, and that to me really sparked my interest, and it made me think of you because I talked to Ryan Edwards. Thank you for that. He
Yep.
was actually on the show.
Oh,
Smart young
wonderful.
guy as well, and to me, I think that's the biggest thing so many viewers and people in my space are missing. And today is a very interesting time, and I'm sure you see it in your business as well, right? You have interest rates at 20-year
Right.
highs. You have very difficult times funding a lot of these startups because
Right.
cash now is king over the last 6 months. And many
Right.
people have equity traps, right? They may be high net worth individuals, but all their money is tied up in real estate or it's tied up in stocks. And all that at the moment is going down. And they're thinking, well, how
Right.
do I invest when I don't have the money to invest? And so it's very interesting to me how the collective is far more intelligent than the individual. And I agree with you 100% on that. So if you had an employee or someone, let's say, that worked for you that was making $100,000 a year and they wanted to get into your world, right? They wanted to meet people such as yourself or such as me or whatever. What would you recommend that they do to get into that world to start learning to go to the next level?
I had the same opportunity because I didn't know about this world until, like I said, a few years ago. And obviously, if first and foremost, if there's a 401k program with matching, I would tell them to match that because that's free money. I do with my company. I match up to 4% of their salary. So that's number one. If you happen to have money left over after that, I would look at a group like ATI, which I'm a part of, Arizona Tech Investors. It's about
Hmm.
$2,000 a year to join. You have to go through an application process, but as long as your intentions are good, I can't see why they wouldn't accept you. It's not my choice, but I know the decision makers. And then I would be on those conference calls and Zoom meetings and in-person meetings because they get a ton of deal flow, and there's 100 plus members, and many of them are former CEOs, and they're either in they were in pharma, med tech, they were in software. You can do deals, you can invest as little as $1,000 in a deal because they create these SPVs, which is just a special purpose vehicle, and it allows you to dip your toe. And so you don't want to just do one deal because it's a numbers game, right? You want to be in 5, 10 deals, but if you can do maybe you make 100 and you've got an extra 10,000 that you can access, or you get a bonus. Do a couple of those deals a year. Now realize these deals may not pay off for 6, 7, 8 years, if at all. It is high risk, but that's what I would do is join a group like that and kind of learn from them and see because they do the vetting, they bring on the CEOs, they have follow up calls and meetings, and that gives you access to deals and also expertise that you would otherwise not have. So that's what I would do, personally.
Now, as an employee, let's go back to let's say 10 years, right? Someone that's earned dollars, right? Working for your dollars. Many real estate agents and people in my space obviously are doing that, right? They're trading time for money. How do you transition to that next step to where you're no longer trading time for money? Now you're trading and leveraging the money that you've saved or the money that you've invested or the employees that you've accrued into actually going into that next step? Is there a difference in mindset? Was there a difference in the way that thought about yourself and your time, or your resources? What was that shift when you started going from, let's say, six figures to seven figures in your business?
Good question. And this comes back to the thing of you only have so much time. You only have so much time for work. You only have so much time in a day. So my dad taught me early on that the best businesses are ones that generate reoccurring passive income, aka mailbox money or dividends, uh, or call it what you will. So subscription-based services, it's all the same thing. It's where you're able to generate income without it being tied to your time, in essence. In some cases, effort. If you've got a really good passive source of income, then you don't have to do anything. That's those are the guys I envy the most. The guys that own tons of commercial real estate, and basically they have a ton of equity in their properties, and they're just basic cash and checks. Now, I'm oversimplifying, of course, because you still have to manage the properties and take care of your tenants. But for me, that was really my dad. That was really what drove my dad to come up with this model where we sold memberships to lawyers, because our business is really, it's twofold. We have our law firm, and we own the rights to Arizona and New Mexico, um, and we get fees from that, and then we also generate income from our members on a monthly basis, uh, through the membership program we have. So, that really resonated with me. But I still have limitations as to how much time and money I can make with my own business. So, I
Hmm.
started looking at really wealthy people and meeting with people that were diversified. And the common thread was, look, I've got my money in a bunch of stuff. I've got it in real estate funds. I've got it in actual real estate, residential, commercial. Um, I've got it in my business. I've got it in equities. So essentially, that's what really triggered me to start looking at other opportunities, and also things that aren't going to take up my time. Now, again, you got to be careful to diversify and not put too much of your money in one thing, because if it doesn't pay out, then you could lose your shirt. But for me, like, I just bought a building in Scottsdale Park that I'm renovating. I already have two tenants, so I'm already generating income. I'm renovating the other three suites that's going to be combined into one for my business, and my company will pay me rent because I'm the owner of the building. And over time, I will positive cash flow. I have a lot in it, so it's going to take me some time to recoup all that money I put in on TIs, as well as the down payment. But long term, I have someone else essentially paying down this asset, and I want to do that a few more times, whether it's with other commercial property or some apartment complexes. But that's just one example where if you have good credit and you've got leverage and some cash, use it to your advantage. But you got to be willing to take some chances also and some risks, uh, and be okay with having some leverage, obviously, to help you grow your wealth. So it's using other people's money more.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point, Ari. Before we get into questions, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat and then Matt can put them on. But the question I have for you, Ari, is what got you into watches? Because I know that's something that you and I both share, and you have some amazing pieces. What got you into that world, and how has that world opened up other introductions to other high net worth people? Because some of the watches that you possess, some of the stuff that I have, obviously you're making a lot of money to purchase these things. What was the fascination with some of these pieces and what led you to them?
So when I was in college, I always wanted to have a nice watch, and back then it was like the Tag Heuers because I couldn't afford a Rolex. My buddy had a Submariner back then because he was spoiled, and his dad gave him a Mercedes and a Rolex. So I was a little bit envious back then, but hey, because the Taggers. So back then there was internet. It was calling some 1-800 number in New York, and I got my first nice watch, if you will. I think I paid $4 for it. It was a professional 2000 two-tone. I think it retailed for 750 at the time, and this is almost 30 years ago. So that's really got me interested in watches. I just love the beauty of it. Obviously back then cell phones weren't a thing, at least portable ones, so it did have a function. And I always told myself if I ever had the means, I'd want to amass a collection of watches. And so I couldn't do it when I was a school teacher. I didn't, my first contract as a school teacher was for $28,000. Uh, I made another 15 or 20 on the side doing another job. But I was fortunate enough to find a place here in town that was selling used Rolexes. So I think after my first or second year of teaching, I was in my mid 20s. I was able to find a Explorer 2 used, but gently used. I think it was like $2,800 at the time, and they were going new for probably five back then. And I remember getting that first watch, and I just felt so good. Like I got my first Rolex. I felt like I had made it. I had accomplished something, and I babied it. And then a couple years later, and back then you could still get watches from these jewelry stores. And so I got a Submariner from one of the authorized dealers in Chandler at the mall, and I think I put on a payment plan where I financed it for like 3-4 years, and I think that watch cost me like 5,500 new. And so I had my two Rolexes, and I was just living large. Felt great, and a few of my buddies had Rolexes at the time. And I had no idea about this extensive watch market and these other brands that existed that weren't so popular. Uh, so years after that, I started going on eBay, which was big back then, and looking at watches that people were selling, and I would print out like my wish list of things I would love to get one of these days. And I think back then it was like an IWC and a Cartier, Santos, and there was a handful, Jaeger. Um, so I printed them out, and I had this big packet. My wife, when she moved in, thought it was funny that I had this packet of watches. I'm like, well, that's the stuff I want to get one of these days. And so probably about 7, 8 years ago, I started, making enough money to where I could start, really looking at some higher end stuff. And so I just started researching, different watches, or I'd see someone wearing a watch and ask them what it was, which is a great conversation starter. And I learned about this industry, and then I went to Europe a few times and saw when I, especially in Switzerland, just how many different brands there are, many of which aren't really super popular in the U.S. because they're micro brands, or they're just real specific in terms of their niche and function. So, at that point, I think I got my first, like, what I thought was really expensive watch was a Type 22 Breguet rose gold, which I
Beautiful
think I got about
piece.
five
Beautiful
five
piece.
years ago. Yeah, great watch. And then I'd always, I kind of heard of Patek Philippe, but know really much about it, and visited their museum in Geneva, and went to the original boutique that I have a relationship with now, and just fell in love with the watches, both as an art form and as the mechanical components, and so I just gotten hooked, and so I have relationships with different boutiques and distributors, and certain watches I look for based on their uniqueness or function, and it's something I'm passionate about. And one of these days, I'd like to learn how to make watches and go to some tours of some of the watch factories. But it brings people together, and it's a good way to start a conversation. Like you said, meet other people with similar interests. 'Cause from there, the conversation takes a turn. Could be first watches, and then investment opportunities, or people we both know, or social activities. So that's really secondarily what you can benefit from if you do have that. But it's a cool hobby, and it's become this crazy, like, status symbol slash even investment category of late, with some of the watches getting 4, 5, 6x retail, and that's come down a bit with the economy taking a downturn. But for a lot of people, they look at it as investment. That, for me, that's not the focus. It's great to be able to buy something, and it has more value than what you paid for it, but that's not what drives me to acquire watches. So
So on that, because we're gonna end about investment, etc. What was the best investment you actually made in a timepiece?
probably my Patek 5726 1A, which is the Nautilus blue face moon phase date. Took me about 4 or 5 years to get it, and multiple visits to Geneva, and purchasing another less powerful one prior to, and make sure they committed to the Nautilus. But this is before things went nuts. Now you can't even get on a wait list or request it there. You have to have relationships with dealer and a purchase history. But that one, yeah, at one point, probably 6 months ago, 4, 5, 6 months ago, the multiple on that one was probably 6, 7 times retail. It's since dropped to about 4 or 5 retail now. I never wanted it for that reason. I wanted it because I love that. I love the Nautilus, and I really like that particular watch. But I've started looking at some other things, and like Lungasoon, uh, German manufacturer. I got one of their watches and one on order, and they make some
Beautiful piece.
exquisite timepieces. Yeah, and only a couple thousand get to the U.S. every year. Actually, less than that. I think 1,100 get come to the U.S. every year, and there's some amazing watch brands. I think IWC is a great value. Panerai makes a nice watch. You can get a good value on that. So there's just so many to choose from. I even have an old Zenith, and I think Zenith makes some great stuff. So really, you shouldn't concern yourself with, like, if you're just wanting a cool watch, with necessarily the brand, find something that you think, looks good and has a history to it. You shouldn't be looking to watch, as an investment tool, because it's volatile, and you're not going to get them for, at a price necessarily that will allow you to make money down the road, unless you have relationships and contacts and know-how and time, quite honestly. So,
It's a great point. So obviously, with what's going on in the marketplace right now, I would assume your business is impacted in some way. As real estate agents and developers, our business has been impacted in a lot of ways with this high interest rate environment. And a lot of people obviously are hurting in a lot of ways, which as an empath makes me really sad. It's like there's so much opportunity in time of struggle, but there's a lot of pain, I think, that people face
right.
as well. What advice would you give to those people that are maybe looking for, that next thing that could help them get over this hump? What would you say to those types of people that are looking and struggling at this point in time?
Well, I mean, I think you have to be resilient and realize that, in times of challenge, there are opportunities. Obviously, if you're an investor and you have some cash set aside or access to some cash, you can buy value in the market, uh, whether it's real estate or the stock market. But you also have to just, again, be patient. Realize that a lot of people are struggling. You obviously have to be able to put food on the table and survive, but um, things are cyclical, and we've been here before. Uh, and things will get better again. You just have to maintain a positive attitude and find opportunities where you might be able to do so. I know it's tough in the real estate market with rates. I know that a bunch of my friends have said basically the market's come to a standstill. No one's buying anything, and with rates as high as they are, people aren't willing to make purchases now, and that's not going to be forever. So you just got to hopefully, be able to sit it out. You may have to find some other opportunities or ways to make money if you don't have the ability to support yourself. Fortunately, with the gig economy, if you got to go out and drive a car to make some money to put food on the table, you've got that opportunity. There are also other positions available. It may not be the sexiest or most lucrative position, but there are plenty of people looking to hire still in other sectors, and you may have to pivot and do something you may not like, or something that may not make you as much money, just to get you through. I mean, I did that as a teacher for years, just because I wasn't happy with that income alone, and I never thought I was too good to work at a restaurant or at a furniture store. So sometimes you got to put your ego aside and just do whatever it takes to survive, to get through the tough times.
It's a really good point. I think when you talk to anyone that has done well, that the winners in life, especially in the financial markets, those that have the resilience, that put their ego aside and say, you know what, times are shit, but with shit comes opportunities, and also
Right.
you're never high enough to do any menial job. And people ask
Right.
me some of the things that I do on a daily basis, like cleaning out houses, or going to open houses, or talking to the maids and things like that. To me, I think that's an important part of business, because you don't know all
Right.
aspects of your business. There's absolutely no way you're going to be able to survive, when things really get difficult. And so I think that was very good advice, and thank you for sharing that. And if you could,
Of course.
is there a quote or something you could leave us with that maybe is a summation of what you talked about today? Maybe something that you heard or your father imparted on you, that could help the audience?
Um, there's one that resonates with me that a couple of my team members have said, or seem to repeat, because I think it really sums up, kind of about relationships. It goes like, uh, people people don't know how much you. What is it? How does it go? Uh, People don't care much care as much about what you know. Wait, I can't remember the phraseology, but basically, the bottom line is people are more concerned with caring about them. The knowledge is important, but caring about individuals is more important. And I'm trying to, it has to do with something, know as much you care. People don't care about as much as you know until they know as much how much you care, something like that. I'm chopping it up, but
Mm.
the point is, it goes back to what I've been saying from the beginning, that you got to put people first, show that you care, show that you're there to help serve them, and then from there, the knowledge, the skill set, the value is important and comes along the way, and the sale or the upside, if you will, follows. Uh, so that's really, and again, I chopped it up, but basically, care about people, serve them, and things will come back to you. Um, tenfold. That's really how I operate my life, is serving people and trying to be of value to them, and in return, the business follows.
Well, Ari, I want to thank you so much for your time. If people want to follow you or message you, what's the best way to do that? Maybe on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, or what's the best way that they
Yeah,
can follow you, Law Tigers?
you can follow me on Instagram. It's Ari. Just look up Ari Levenbaum. I'm sorry, on LinkedIn, Ari Levenbaum. I also do have a Facebook page. If you want to just hit me up and ask for a like. Either one is fine. Probably Facebook's the one I don't do a lot personally on it, but you could just ask for like there, or you can send me a message on LinkedIn as well.
Well, I just want to thank you again so much for your time. And I'm going to Hawaii here, but when I get back, I'd like to
Oh,
take you out to
wonderful.
lunch again. That was fun.
Would love to. I'd love to. We can talk more about investments and watches.
Awesome. Love it. Well, thank you again. Have a great day. And thank you guys
You.
for the audience for tuning in and listening to Ari's story. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye bye.